And it says this Hangout on air is live. I'm live, and I'm going to continue talking about this business rules kata that I implemented in F sharp. I got to keep going, man. I got to keep going. I have to get myself into this routine. So I'm going to like try to pump out a video like every day or every other day, whether it's having somebody on here that I chop it up with, or if it's just me going through these katas and trying to get my weight up as a functional programmer. This is really important to me. So I'm gonna keep on going, right? So what I want to talk about is, let me share my screen. Let me share my screen. Is I don't know. There's a video that I posted maybe a couple days ago in which I was working on this kata right here, right? Saying so on codekata.com, there's this kata 16 called business rules, and it says, how can you tame, let me select this, how can you tame a wild and changing set of business rules? And then they go in detail and say that imagine you're writing an order processing application for a large company. And essentially this company has like hella rules based on what should happen when a product or service has been ordered, and they have all these different case scenarios. And what this kata is saying is, it is common for these scenarios to change or for more scenarios to be added or subtracted. And for example, some of these scenarios are, if the payment for a physical product, if the payment is for a physical product, generate a packing slip for shipping. If the payment is for a book, create a duplicate packing slip for the royalty department. If the payment is for a membership, activate that membership. If the payment is for an upgrade to a membership, apply the upgrade. If the payment is for a membership or upgrade, email the owner and inform them of the activation or upgrade. If the payment is for a video, learning to ski, then add a free first aid video to the packing slip. If the payment is for a physical product or a book, generate a commission payment to the agent. A book is not a physical product. And so there's like some details, or there's some ambiguity, if I said that right, in here that needs to be clarified. But I mean, that stuff represents the complexity of really some of the businesses that I've worked in which they have these business rules that need to get implemented. And then they say down here, you're faced with implementing the system. The rules are complicated and fairly arbitrary. What's more, you know that they're going to change. Once the system goes live, all sorts of special cases will come out of the woodwork. And so they say that your objective is to, well, how can you tame these wild business rules? How can you build a system that will be flexible enough to handle both the complexity and the need for change? And how can you do it without condemning yourself to years and years of mindless support? So what I'm looking at this is, and how can you do it without condemning yourself to years and years of mindless support? My first implementation was this over here, where I had wrote some code down. I wonder if all this will fit on my editor. I can even copy paste this. My original code was essentially this right here, where for the very first time in a long time, I didn't do TDD. And this is something I want to talk about, is I have this habit, and I guess it's similar to object-oriented programming. When I'm not doing TDD within object-oriented programming, which is basically when I'm not being paid to program and I'm just messing around at home, I will I will immediately start thinking about all my classes, right? All my types in C sharp. And I found myself doing this, having that same habit, right? That same type of process um, in F sharp, where I would immediately start as I'm reading this business rules for this kata. My phone's ringing. I'm immediately silence this phone. I don't know how to silence this phone. I'm immediately thinking about all the different types that are in here. For example, physical product, book, um, package slip, membership, right? And so video, like I was parsing these keywords, and of course my dog is barking right now. I was parsing these keywords, and I started immediately, start putting in all these different types, book, video, other, packing slip, and I went ahead and I knocked out this kata, right? I didn't validate that my code actually works, but I mean, to me, it made sense, but I wasn't proud of the implementation details. Like when we get down to this right here, like when they ask the question of my dog is barking. Sooner or later, I have to let her in. When they ask the question of, how can you do it without condemning yourself to years and years of mindless support? Essentially, it's how can some BA or business analyst go in here and immediately know what to modify or what to add as new behavior, right? And the thing is I'm looking at this respond to function, and I'm looking at this, and even though I kind of get it, I still have to like zero in on this large function to figure out what I need to change, right? And so as a programmer, I understand it, but I have to like look at this function, parse this function until I identify, oh yeah, I need to change this, I need to change that, right? So I mean, if I didn't write this code myself and I was looking at this function, it'll probably take me like probably 15 to 20 seconds to figure out what's really going on in here. Um, and as a and that's me as a programmer, right? Imagine a BA. Again, I would be doing this quote unquote mindless support. And so let me silence my phone real fast. All right. So I went ahead and I went on Stack Overflow and I was like, hey, can someone like code review my implementation? Because I'm not sure if functional programming is the best approach or the best tool for this particular kata. Um, and the reason why I say that is because, well, when I looked at the implementation that I came out with, in which I was going with types first, and then I was creating functions afterwards to entertain the types or to complement the types, like it looks like it was going to do the job, but it just didn't look simple. It didn't look clear, you know. And so I went ahead and posted my code for feedback, and then Mark Seaman came to the rescue. Mark Seaman is like the Chuck Norris of functional or of F sharp, and he's like my unofficial mentor when it comes to like internet. He came and he's like, well, you guys could look at my question on here. Um, but he essentially said, yeah, you can use functional programming for everything when it comes to especially this type of problem. And he basically quickly just stamped out these types, right? And then he did something really interesting. He created a number of functions that all had the same that all shared the same parameter, right? So this slip for royalty, this activate and this upgrade, they all belong to this command discriminated union. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And also, they all did pattern matching to see if the function would actually handle the context of the argument that was passed in. And if it didn't, then they would just return empty. And I'm like, that's interesting too. And so each of these functions that he provided, they all do pattern matching. And the pattern matching is, hey, can I handle this argument? Yeah. All right. Create this list with this data. Else, I can't handle this argument. Then just pass the empty list. And that's how he did each function. And I'm like, yo, that sounds really familiar. Like that sounds like pub sub. Um, but in this case with pub sub with the publisher subscribe pattern, or should I say the observer pattern, subscribers know exactly what they want. And so subscribers will register for a message and then they will get notified of the message that they're actually interested in. And they're not going to get notified of messages that they're not interested in because they didn't subscribe to those messages. But when I'm looking at this functional programming approach, this alternative, it smells like the same type of pattern being used, except the observer pattern is object oriented, and I'm seeing this pattern is the functional programming approach. So I thought that was really interesting. And so then he pretty much he defines these functions, and within functional programming, I mean functions are values too. And so he then creates a method called handle, and then he provides two arguments, handlers and good, right? And then he uses this list.collect, which is really useful. If I could explain what list.collect is, I'll try my best. Is list.collect will operate on the each element of an array, and it will take the current element of an array, take the argument that was passed in to this collect function, and it will apply that argument to however that element is being used, thus generating a list for each element that we're applying the argument to. And then all these lists become transformed into, so you have a set of lists, right? Because you have, this happens for each element within this list, and then it'll take the set of lists that have been generated and it'll flatten that set of lists down into one list. And so I'm looking at the way he implemented it, and then he has this function called handle all, in which he calls, well, no, handle all is not a method. He then calls this handle function that he originally defined up here, right? And he actually, within the list, he passes in all the functions in which they all accept the same argument and they all return the same result or the same type. And I'm like, oh, this dude he has a list of functions that he's passing into a method, and things just work. So then he shows the how this would be used, and he says handle all, and he passes the book item within this discriminated union, which is listed up here of good, right? So the book is right here, and he passes that in, and this is the result that we get. There's a slip that gets generated for shipping, and then there's a slip that gets generated for royalty. And I'm like, so essentially what he does is he takes every function that can possibly act on a purchase, whether that purchase is of a good or should I say, whether that purchase is of a product or of a service, hence like a membership. And he doesn't discriminate. He'll take all those functions that act on a purchase, in which they all share the same type, and he will just give every function within that list an opportunity to act on the item that was purchased. And if they handle it, then they're going to return a result. And if they don't, then they're going to return a result as well, in which that result is going to be a list, whether it's an empty list or a list that actually resulted from that particular function acting on that transaction, um, with that good serving as a context. So that was like really cool. And that was like, I don't know, that was just jaw dropping for me. And so I went ahead and without it, I combed through his code and I understood what he was doing. And then my implementation, without looking at his solution again, but just understanding the concepts, I fleshed this out right here. Obviously, this was inspired by what Mark had provided, the code that he provided. And so I was like, all right. And so what I did instead is instead of starting with the types and identifying all the types, because I was trying to figure out like, yo, how did he come out with that solution? I feel like he was more focused on the functions than he was on the types. And I'm not sure what his thought process was, but I decided, well, let me experiment. Of course, I already knew what the solution would look like, but I was like, all right, without looking at his solution, but understanding how he did it, um, I'm not going to define the types first and then create functions that operate on those types. No, I am going to focus on the the functions first, and then I'm going to flush out potential types that these functions are going to require. And so I was like, there's going to be a function called handle shipping. There's going to be a function called handle royalty. There's going to be a function called handle commission. There's going to be a function called handle video. There's going to be a function called handle email. And if you review the code kata, you'll see why these functions were created. These are responses to a purchase, whether it's a physical product or a membership. And so my dog is mad at me right now. So let me hurry up and try to wrap up. So I went function first without identifying my types. And then I went ahead and fleshed out the types under here and then did all these through pattern matching. And then based on the example that Mark Seaman provided, I defined this handle all function. And then I do this handlers, which is a list of functions that handle the same argument type. And I do a collect, in which that collect will take these functions and it will actually do which are partially applied functions. If I could say that, it throws the actual argument to satisfy the function with this required argument, and then that's where these functions actually get executed in here. These functions are thrown in here called handlers, right? Handlers is a list in which you can just create a function, create a new function, and add it in here. And then we execute it with this let result equals, I take handlers, and then I take an actual item from this product discriminated union, which it could be anything. It could be physical, it could be book, it could be video, it could be start membership, it could be upgrade membership. I take one of those union cases or one of those union case values, and I provide it as an argument, attach some data to it, and then I call this handle wall, and it executes, right? And so what that does is if I were to execute all this, Alt Enter, the result is email owner standard, right? So this is, I could do Control Alt C, and then for clarity, I can Alt Enter, and this is what resulted when the purchase item is starting a standard membership, right? This dog is getting on my nerves now. I could also say book, and with this book, yeah, book doesn't require any attached data. When I execute this, we see that the list is a issue slip for shipping. We see then another element for issue slip for royalty department, and then we see pay commission agent. And so I thought that was really cool. And now that is in my arsenal of tools to use, techniques to apply whenever I have to deal with crazy business rules, in which I think this is pretty understandable. It's not as obfuscated as the original solution that I wrote. You basically throw a handler or some type of processor into this list of processors, and then you call over here, you provide an argument, you call this handle law, that has a list of all the different processors that can be used, and this is going to go through the chain, and if any of those functions within that chain can handle it, they'll handle it, and that's it. So let me return back to me. Let me return back to me. Stop presenting. Yeah, so I already wrote a blog post for it. It's not really a blog post. I just copy and pasted my source code. I'm taking this video. I'm adding this video to it. To the blog post is bizmonger.wordpress.com. I'm Bizmonger. All right, that's my internet name, and that's it. So I'm done. I satisfied my quota, and I'm out. So peace, adios, te veo a ratito. I gotta let my dog back inside the house. Yeah, I'm Scott Nimrod. I'm available for hire, mobile app, desktop app, test automation. All right, adios.